Okay, so once you've had some time to play around with your machine and get a little bit comfortable with it, we're going to try some exercises. So I've emailed you there are some sheets to download. So if you have a look at this one, is the first one we're going to do. And it is a maze, we're going to follow it around. And this is all about building your confidence and trusting your machine, okay? So I've taken the thread out of the machine to do this exercise. You could have the thread in, it's absolutely fine, either way. And we're going to position our foot so that the line is directly in the centre of our foot, okay? When you start to sew, once it's got going, you can let go and see that the machine will go straight all by itself. Really, you're doing a left and right directional twist to make sure that it's heading in a straight line. You're not making it go straight. When you get towards the corner, you're going to stop before you get there, and you're going to use the wheel to turn the last few turns until we get to directly on the corner. Or as close to the corner. Then we're going to lift the foot and you're going to pivot and spin it around. We're then going to come down the next side and repeat all the way round. Again, stop before you get to the corner, use the wheel to do the last few stitches. So we're now going to work on our next piece, which is a heart shape. So whereas the last exercise was all about trusting your machine, this exercise is about learning to manipulate your fabric to go where you want it to go, okay? So hopefully the last one has built some of your confidence, but now we're going to forget all about that and we're going to do something completely different, okay? So I shall take this over to the machine. So with fingers on either side, I'm going to hold the paper gently and I'm going to twist it to follow. I'm looking straight down the centre and I'm going to twist the paper to follow the line. You can also, if you imagine it's like a circle with a pivot point, if I press here and this part is moving, it will spin. So if I can press here, and it will just twist. So with a combination of those, there's another little technique where if it looks like there's too much of a curve, with the needle in, you can lift and just spin it a tiny bit round and then carry on. So with a combination of those techniques, you're going to work your way all the way round. Okay, so I hope those exercises have built up your confidence a little bit. Now we're going to work on the next one, which is this hexagon. And what we're going to do is, at the moment we've been following a straight line, but really when it actually comes to sewing, normally you have a piece of fabric which is cut out and you need to follow the edge. So what we're going to do is we're going to cut these out and come back to me when you cut them out, okay? Okay, so we're now going to sew around our hexagon that we've cut out, and you could always, if you prefer to sew on fabric, you can use this as a template and cut out some fabric, that's absolutely fine. And then afterwards we're going to go ahead and do our circle and cut that one out, okay? So we're going to go ahead and sew this one. I said it's fine to sew on paper. It's actually quite a useful thing. You can use thread, and if you have a little bit of time, you can stitch round different shapes with nice coloured contrasting thread and put them together and make really cool Christmas cards, things like that, especially if you sew on really nice handmade papers, things like that. They look really impressive, so it's a nice little fun task to do. Okay, so we're going to sew around this. On the machine, you will see there are markings and they should have numbers, okay? This has 1.5 here and 2 here, and down here it's got inches. If your machine does not have any numbers, it will have some lines. If it doesn't have numbers, it's worth putting a tape measure from the centre of where the needle sits and making sure that you know where 1.5 is and where 2 centimetres is, because they are the most used seam allowances. Okay. So we're going to start in the middle of our first side and we're going to line up the outside edge with our 1.5 mark. Okay. We're going to sew down to a point, and then we don't know where to go. So we're going to, using the wheel, we're going to turn so that the needle goes into the paper fabric, and we lift it and we're going to spin it, and that is not the right position. So we're going to come back, make sure it's straight, and turn the wheel for a couple of stitches to make sure that it's in the right place. We'll spin it back round, and here now it's in the right place. You can do that turning it backwards and forwards in as many times as you need to get it into the right place. And with practice you will be able to gauge that distance more, but when you're starting out it's really important that you make sure that the seam allowance is the right size when you go round the corner. Okay, never lift your foot up without having your needle in the fabric. That's really, really important. I see it all the time. It's a very, very common mistake, and you will always get a jump in your stitching. You'll never get the needle to go back in the right place. Okay. Then we're going to come back down the next side and we're going to work our way all the way around. Check it, turn it back, make sure it's straight, do another stitch, there we go, and down the next side. And when we get to And when we get round back towards the beginning, we're going to come down and we're going to see if we can get those lines to join on top of each other. Okay. Okay, so we're going to sew around our circle, and this we're going to do in the same techniques that we use sewing around our heart. So we're going to go straight to the machine. Again, you can have thread or not thread, either is fine. I'm going to place it to the 2 centimetre seam allowance on this one. It makes, again, no difference. You could sew round 3 circles, one at 2.5, one at 2, one at 1.5, and one at 1 if you really want it. It's absolutely fine. It doesn't make any difference. Do not be too hard on yourself. We are not Da Vinci. We are not aiming for perfect circles. It's about practice, practice, practice. Okay. So some people find this really hard. Some people find this really easy. And either way, it's fine. We've got to, give yourself a bit of a break. None of us are going to get perfect circles. It's just about learning how to manipulate the fabric. Okay. So we're going to go ahead and check this seam allowance, and all I'm going to do, I'm going to use that pivoting technique where I press down in the center, and I'm going to use one hand on the front to guide this point to here, and I'm only going to worry about this little bit. I'm not going to worry about the whole thing because it's just too much. Okay. My eye also, I just wanted to note, my eye is looking here on this point here. So I'm not worried about what the needle's doing, I'm just looking on that seam allowance edge. Okay, and you can stop and start. So I'm pressing here in the center and I'm just gauging a bit of tension on this finger. I'm letting it ride up to that 2 point. I'm watching right here. And then hopefully when we come back round to the beginning, we should get it to line up with our original lines. And there's our nice circle. Okay, I just wanted to touch slightly on health and safety as well. I know we're all a bit over the top these days, I find, with health and safety, but there are a few really basic things which are really good practice. And it's best to start from day one. So when you are sewing, especially if you're coming at sewing later in life, we do tend to all be drivers, and when we put our foot on the pedal, we tend to hover like you would when you're driving. Don't do that. So when you are sewing, you put your foot on the pedal, you sew, and then you lift your foot up and you take it away, and keep it away from the pedal for the whole time that you are not stitching. And then as soon as you want to go back to stitch, you move your foot and put it back on the pedal. This stops you from having any accidents where you are changing a needle or fiddling with something and you lean forward and press down on the pedal by mistake. That would be not a very nice thing to do. Secondly, when you're actually sewing, the little metal foot where the needle is going in and out around in the middle of that little foot, that needs to be your safety zone. So your finger should never need to touch that metal foot, okay? If you keep it just a centimetre away, the needle's not going to jump out at you and it won't come and get you, so you're perfectly safe. But if you just think of that metal foot as your safety zone and you don't want your fingers touching it, just keep them that little bit further away and rest your hands gently either side on the plate of the sewing machine, on the base of the sewing machine, then you're never going to come into any problems. So I hope you've enjoyed our first module. I would really like you to spend a little bit of time playing around with your sewing machine. If you've got some plain fabric,
that you are going to use for our next project, which will be our shopping tote bag. You can just try out some of the stitches. The measurements will be there for you to cut out, so you could just try out some of your stitches, do borders. You could cut out different shapes. These are just in felt, but you could cut out fabric and applique them on like so, and just really have a bit of a play this week. Don't set yourself any major task. Just try out all the different patterns and just get comfortable. You can even go through and just try every stitch on the machine. Nothing terrible will happen. So if you may possibly, if you put it onto a buttonhole, it might not like that because you might not have the right foot, and we'll talk about that later on. So maybe avoid those ones. But all of the other stitches, just try them. You really can't go wrong. Nothing terrible is going to happen. So just build your confidence, practice all these different techniques, and be ready for making our bag. So next week we're going to do 2 projects. We're going to make a shopping bag first, and then we're going to go straight on. So there'll be 2 different modules. So you'll get the shopping bag, and then we'll go on and we'll make this origami box. Okay, so enjoy, and I will see you next week.